Here we go. My final video about the common genres of Happy Wheels levels. It's for real this time. Let's rock and roll. The glass break. This is the stupidest Happy Wheels genre that I've ever seen. I hate the fact that these are popular. There are several glass panes lined up in front of me, and I run into them. I just break right through them. That's it. That's the entire game. Some of these panes are thick, so I smash into them multiple times. There's absolutely no complex thought involved in the production and consumption of these games. I just bash into the same walls over and over. No skill, no strategy. Some creatures try to make it look flashy. They make the glass panes spin around. What the hell was the point of that? It shatters immediately once it touches my vehicle. I barely have to do anything. Then there's the vertical glass fall. Now the panes shatter immediately under my wheels. I don't even have to move myself. Bottles. What's the point of this? Just adding more bottles does not make it any more difficult. They all shatter immediately upon impact. Glass breaks are the most unga-bunga ass crap that I've ever had the displeasure of critiquing. And believe me, I've played through a lot of garbage for the purposes of these videos. Next we have the jet run. In this style of level, there are several vertical walls of jet engines between the player character and the goal. The objective is to maneuver around the engines. They start in a sleeping state, and they quickly jet to the left side of the corridor when they collide with the character or any other moving body. The playable character is usually Irresponsible Dad. The engines may kill him simply due to a powerful impact to a vital area, such as the brain. Alternatively, if he fails to maneuver around a certain engine, it will push him all of the way back to the beginning of the level and into some spikes. The engines in the first few columns are small and they move slowly, so it's easy enough to get around them. The larger and faster ones are positioned closer to the goal. Strategies for jet runs? You know, just keep moving. Don't move directly at the engines. If you only go straight, some of the engines will get stuck in front of you and won't be able to pass under you. Also, you leave your head exposed to injury in that case. I lift up my front wheel slightly as I'm approaching the engines. I bring it high enough that it triggers the engines that are above my normal head level, and they flow right over me. As I do this, the lower engines build up under my wheels. I then shift my position over them onto the front wheel. They are able to pass under me. If I move too slowly and I don't release the lower engines, they will push me back into the spikes. This can get challenging later in the level, as the engines move more quickly. That's about all that I have in terms of proven strategies. You can try throwing your kid at the engines. That works sometimes. Some jet engines have a tendency to explode after they hit the spike wall. I don't know what's the exact set of conditions that can trigger an explosion, but I've observed that it happens more frequently when faster and more powerful engines are involved. For this reason, jet runs that include fast engines early in the level are especially difficult. When these engines graze the characters, they tend to rip off body parts, from either the father or from the son. These body parts get stuck in the spikes. Then, the engine explodes, and it ejects those body parts towards the right end of the corridor at a very high speed. As they are flying around, they collide with the remaining engines in the level, which activate and jet out to the left. All of a sudden, there's a huge cascade of the fastest jet engines coming right at me, and this is all happening in the span of a few frames with very little warning. There is a variant of the jet run called the jet fall. In this variant, I fall freely through a field of jet engines with no vehicle. The engines usually don't appear in densely packed rows. There's more space between them. Mechanically, I think that the jet run is the superior format. Most jet falls that I've played are way too easy to be any fun. In free fall, Segway Guy's body doesn't act like a rigid vehicle. There aren't any crannies in which an engine could wedge itself. His body naturally repositions upon impact and spins around. Because of this, most engines slide right past him and only push him up very slightly before he falls right back down. For an engine to drag him all of the way up to the spikes on top, it really has to be a direct hit to the abdomen with approximately equal weight on each side, so that he doesn't just slide right off. Some jet falls are so easy that I don't have to input any movements after I dismount the Segway. What is this, Plinko? Level designers are aware that these engines are very easy to avoid, so they compensate by adding a huge number of engines. Look at all of these. But that doesn't make the level more difficult in any meaningful way, it just takes longer. The most common way to die in a jet fall is to take a direct hit to the head from a powerful engine, but it's easy enough to position my head away from the engines, or to swat them away with my arms. The spike fall is very simple and straightforward. You have two large spike sets that form a funnel shape, with a narrow opening at the bottom. The goal is to jump into the space from high up. The area of the funnel is larger than the field of view. At the starting point, I generally can't see the opening at the bottom, or the spike set on the far side. I can see the closer spike set, but I don't know how deep it goes. To start with, I roll slowly off of the side of this platform. My goal is to gain the right speed such that my character falls parallel to the left spike set. If I roll off too slowly, he'll hit the spikes on the left. If I go too quickly, he'll hit the spikes on the right. It may take several tries to find just the right speed. There is a margin of error in the required speed. You can get away with rolling off more quickly if the spike sets are short and the opening at the bottom is especially wide. In some cases, it is possible to take a hit and to break free from the spikes and survive long enough to get to the finish line. The playable character is usually Segway Guy. Different players have different opinions on whether or not you should eject from the vehicle. I prefer to stay in the vehicle throughout the playthrough. The Segway keeps him in the upright position so that he can easily fit through a narrow opening. Even on the Segway, he still has enough freedom of movement such that he can lean slightly to the left or the right. Some spike falls allow other characters. It's actually easier to complete these levels as Irresponsible Dad. He can consistently survive a collision with the spike set by taking the hit with his wheels. He also has much more mid-air control of his position in comparison to Segway Guy. I can slow him down by quickly pressing left and right in alternation. The Arrow Run. This is a fun one. I ride very quickly down a large staircase. There are arrow guns at the base of each step, and they shoot at me as I pass. The lower steps have more guns, and they shoot more arrows in a shorter interval. The playable character is usually Irresponsible Dad, which is good. JB is my regular bullet sponge. I can also throw him down the stairs to absorb some of the projectiles farther down, but that strategy isn't super useful against arrows. These arrow guns have a lot of ammunition, and JB is only moving over a given step long enough to take a few arrows from each. Once he's fallen out of range, I'll be the one passing by those same guns, and I won't have anyone covering my back. I think that it's best to save JB as bait for a harpoon gun. Those things only fire one shot each. Some arrow runs include guns above the player character, where JB's body won't block the shots. There's a variation called the harpoon run, which features harpoons as the main hazard. You may think that these are way harder than an arrow run, since harpoons do way more damage. They greatly restrict my mobility if they get stuck between my wheels, and they can easily kill my character in one hit. Still, I find that the difficulty is about the same. Though you may not be able to see the difference when the character is at rest, harpoons are considerably slower than arrows. Even if he's moving very quickly, arrows can easily catch up with my character. That's why he gets hit so many times. But a harpoon's speed is approximately equal to a typical fast riding speed. So if I start off riding quickly and I maintain my distance, I can complete a harpoon run without getting hit once. And even if I do get hit, I can manage to shake off the injury in a way. A hit to the back generally does less damage than a full frontal collision. Watch out for the anchored harpoons though. Those will mess up your whole day. They completely kill my inertia and drag me backwards towards the other harpoons that I was trying to avoid. Difficult harpoon runs are often the ones that include boost pains. They make me go very quickly, adding another hazard. Now I'm not just concerned with the harpoons, I can also take damage by hitting the platforms at a high velocity. So, harpoons only move about as quickly as the character can pedal. Also, one can set the gun to only fire at a specific angle when the player crosses a specific line of sight. Some levels use these factors to a very cool visual effect. As the character is pedaling by, the harpoons come up behind him in a very uniform wave. They won't hit him if he keeps going straight at a high speed. Escape the box levels are less common than the other types of levels that I've discussed so far. Still, there are a good number of them, and they've pervaded through most of Happy Wheels' history. I figure that they're worth mentioning. The character, without a vehicle, starts in a box of some kind, with an exit on at least one side. There's usually a glass pane blocking the exit, and I have to shatter it to get out. Many levels include a cannon full of blades, or some other hazard that will kill my character if I'm too slow. That imposes a sort of time limit. I don't like these levels very much. It's the same gimmick over and over. Just kick the glass until it breaks. And the glass is very temperamental. Sometimes it doesn't break no matter how much I hit it. I still don't know the exact method to finish these quickly, and I doubt that there is an exact method that works across most bosses. In most cases, I just mash buttons until I'm free. There's hardly any skill involved. The last genre that I want to cover is the don't move. These levels are really cool. The character moves automatically, under the influence of moving shapes in the environment, and arrives at a predetermined outcome that the level's creator carefully designed. I don't have to input any movements, and the level probably won't run to completion if I do. I have tremendous respect for users who design well-made don't move levels. The amount of work that goes into even a short and simple don't move is huge. A very slight change to the layout of a level can have substantial effects that cascade through the whole level and completely change its outcome. A level designer may test a level hundreds of times and make incremental changes along the way, in the process of ironing out every flaw and making a large and complex level that flows seamlessly. I'm showing some relatively short don't move levels in this video. The longer ones take a few minutes to run to completion, and I don't want to drag on this episode's runtime unnecessarily. I encourage you viewer people to find some don't move levels on TotalJerkface.com, or to look for some gameplay on YouTube. They're really cool, and it's worth watching these levels in full. I've never attempted to make one of these levels because the amount of testing and optimization required to make a really impressive and original don't move is just beyond what I want to do. I'd quickly get bored of it and start to hate the perceived flaws in my own work. Furthermore, I wouldn't want to put all of that effort into a level that may only run properly on a small portion of computers. Happy Wheels relies on the Flash Player plugin. The plugin runs slightly differently on different operating systems. Because of this, don't move levels that were optimized on one operating system may not work correctly on another. I'll explain this phenomenon in further detail in a future video when I discuss inaccurate replays. Most older don't move levels won't run to completion on contemporary computers. Perhaps the creator designed the level in Windows Vista in 2010, and I'm playing it on Windows 10 in 2020. There are enough differences in how those two operating systems run calculations that the physics are slightly different. That really sucks because I remember that there were some really great don't move levels in the early days of Happy Wheels, and they're now inaccessible to most players. There's a specific type of don't move level called a heart transplant. In these levels, the player character's body is destroyed early on, and the perspective follows the character's heart. In my experience, these levels run more consistently across different types of computers. I suppose that the physics are simpler in these levels. The heart only has two interactions. It rotates and it bounces. There are few moving parts that could act differently depending on the operating system. Often, a user will put a lot of effort into a don't move level, and then screw up the whole thing by not specifying which character you're supposed to use. Granted, I've also forgotten to force the character in more than one of my own levels, but I've managed to work in some reference to the intended character into the description, or in context clues from the genre of the level. But some creators don't give any indication of the level's intended character. You can make a don't move level for any character in the game, but most won't work at all unless if you're playing with the exact character for which the creator designed it. I'm not going to sort through all 11 playable characters, trying to find out which one makes the level run to completion. There's a unique type of don't move level called a character guesser. The player is free to choose any playable character. The different characters and their vehicles have different distributions of weight. The moving shapes in the level cause the characters to move to different areas. The level determines which character you chose at the beginning based on where the character ends up. These levels are much shorter than a typical don't move level. They last for a few seconds, and the character moves the length of only a few screens. That makes sense, considering that these levels account for as many as 11 predetermined outcomes. It would be a very complicated task to make 11 full-length don't move levels in one. I like these ones. They have a lot of replay value. So, those are the major genres of Happy Wheels levels that you've surely encountered if you've played the game extensively. Of course, these don't cover every single level in existence. These are models that originated at some early point in the game's history, and the community built a culture around them. Creators turned to reproduce the best levels of these genres, and they made their own slight variations. These models have slowly evolved over time, and they continue to receive new and innovative iterations even today. There are other recurring models that do exist and that have received their own iterations, but that don't qualify as staple genres in my opinion. I'm going to quickly run through an honorable mention. This is a freeze wall level. The player runs into several walls that consist of sleeping shapes. Once I collide with the shapes, they wake up and begin to move. I also activate a timed trigger, which converts the shapes to fixed objects after a certain interval. They are now obstacles, and I have to work my way around them to proceed. As I go farther in, there are more individual shapes, and the trigger works on a shorter interval. Mechanically, these levels are very interesting, but for whatever reason, this style of design never caught on. They started appearing in 2013, and they've become more obscure and underutilized since then. I rarely ever see new freeze wall levels in the level browser. They were a fad that came and went, and I haven't seen many substantial innovations on the basic mechanic of freezing shapes converting into fixed shapes. Some creators have changed the direction of progress from horizontal to vertical, and that's about it. Per my estimates, there are only about 2,000 dedicated freeze wall levels, in which getting past these walls is the main gameplay mechanic. You may see freeze walls as one small obstacle in a larger and more complex obstacle course. Still, I think that these are a cool mechanic. They have certain uses in gameplay. I used a freeze fall in my level, random number generator. Next up we have the assassin levels. In this type of level, the player grabs a weapon and drops on top of another character from high up, with the goal of killing that character. The player may start high up on a ledge, or there may be a movement item like a fan or a cannon, which shoots the player up into the air. It doesn't really matter. These levels are an artifact of the early days of Happy Wheels. Almost no one makes these anymore. There's an even more uncommon and even more ephemeral archetype called Finish Him. In this type of level, the weapon is a log, and there's a paddle platform that launches it into the air. I consider this to be a variation of the assassin levels. To me, it doesn't matter much whether the weapon is an axe, or a huge log, or some compromise between the two. The core mechanics are the same. I'll end this with one more honorable mention. The harpoon stretch. The playable character is Lawnmower Man. He takes a shot to the back from an anchored harpoon right at the beginning of the level. The goal is to reach the end of the level by stretching out the line of the harpoon. Lawnmower Man does this by riding up on his rear wheel. I'm surprised that it's even possible to stretch the line so far past its usual length, and I don't think that any other character can do this. I suppose that the lawnmower is the vehicle with the most traction. This is another fad that came and went. Most harpoon stretch levels are almost identical. There's very little that you could do to change the format. For this to even work, the floor has to be perfectly flat, and there can't be any obstacles that would block the lawnmower. It takes all of the vehicle's strength just to move forward. So, those are the genres of Happy Wheels levels. Thank you for watching. In my next video, I will be giving an overview of the various characters and their attributes.